So welcome to PACE. I'd like to welcome both the PACE community, that's the students, faculty, staff, administration, and alumni of PACE, as well as members and guests of the MIT Enterprise Forum of New York City. I'd like to thank a number of people, especially Christina Dolan, who's the chair of the MIT Enterprise Forum of New York City chapter, who pulled together this fantastic panel and moderator. I'd also like to thank Nikhil and the eLab staff. We have 5 or 6 people that did a lot of work to pull this together, and of course the panel and moderator. So with your phones, if you would switch off your phones, but don't turn them off, because we'd like you to use it on social media. Twitter, we use at PaceELab and at MIT EFNYC, and the hashtag, although it's a little long, Uber-ization, sounded good. So feel free to tweet, and the moderator may take tweeted-in questions if we supply him an iPad. And the only other housekeeping item is, if you would, please return your name tags on the way out. If you'd like to keep the insert for a souvenir, you're welcome to, but we're recycling the badges. So as a very quick intro, my name is Bruce Bachenheimer. I'm a clinical professor of management here at PACE and the executive director of our Entrepreneurship Lab, which is like our equivalent of an entrepreneurship center. I've been here for about a dozen years, but don't have an academic career. I did everything from starting on Wall Street to taking off and going sailing for a few years, and a bunch of other stuff, and started a couple companies both in the US and overseas. I wear a second hat as a member of the board of the MIT Enterprise Forum and a past chapter chair, and also served on the organization's global board up in Cambridge. And I've been pleased to take advantage of that partnership by holding several events here at PACE with the MIT Enterprise Forum, most notably the PACE Pitch Contest, where we've had great speakers come down, like Sal Khan of the Khan Academy, and Iqbal Qadir, the founder of Grameen Phone and the Legatum Center at MIT. And we've also paid it back. We awarded a $25,000 prize for a 3-minute pitch from a team from MIT for egg energy. We also have a unique relationship with the MIT Enterprise Forum of Israel, where we received a very generous donation from a PACE alum to run an Israel entrepreneurship initiative that we're doing in partnership with the MIT Enterprise Forum of Israel, and we actually have one of the companies that are participating in that program with us tonight. As a quick intro to the PACE, the entrepreneurship program actually started in 1979, so it's 36 years old, and the eLab, or the Entrepreneurship Lab, which is a block away, started in 2012. It's a collaborative workspace to promote multidisciplinary problem-based learning in an experiential way in the development of an entrepreneurial mindset. Again, we have the URL for both the Enterprise Forum and the Entrepreneurship Lab, so I'd encourage you to take a look at it. We do all kinds of competitions, a pitch contest, business plan competition, hackathon, mobile app contest, all kinds of speaker series, networking events. We have several endowed scholarships. We ran a veterans entrepreneurship boot camp and many other things. And one of the reasons I mention it and would invite you to exchange cards with me afterwards is we're always looking for speakers, panelists, judges, mentors, et cetera. So while we have half the room from the outside community, I wanted to bring that up. Also, I was excited for this event, and again, thank Chris for organizing such a great panel. In the next issue, I believe the December issue of Entrepreneur Magazine, there's a special on the role of luck and timing, and I was interviewed and brought up, actually, companies like Uber, that it's very interesting. They were founded in the depth of the Great Recession, and perhaps because of that, they were very successful, because people were willing to become taxi drivers and rent out their homes. And if they started, a few years earlier or a few years later, they may not have been as successful as they were. So I think it's just a a wonderful and very timely topic. And that idea of the role of luck and timing is something that is, in fact, very important in entrepreneurship. So you could see a full description of the panel and moderator inside the program that everyone has. Michael Schrage, a research fellow at the MIT Center for Digital Business, is a moderator, and our panelists are Umang Dua, the founder and COO of Handy, David Manella, the Chief Revenue Officer of Fivver, Allison Tepley, the Senior Vice President for Marketing and Business Development at Axial, and Joseph Tersey, the co-founder and CEO of PRIV. But just before I turn it over to our moderator, I'd like to invite Chris Dolan to come up to tell you some of the things going on at the Enterprise Forum.
I know that we have a very exciting panel, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. But first, I wanted to thank Bruce for hosting us. Lovely reception in this beautiful space. And I also wanted to thank all the panelists for coming here as well, and my dear friend Michael Schrage here. But I also wanted to let you know that we have a great lineup of other events that are coming along. On November 18th, we are kicking off the $7 million X Prize. And we're actually having a huge event over at Cooper Union where we are helping people understand the problem with adult literacy. And also we have a great panel of entrepreneurs who will help you figure out how you can compete for the $7 million prize. And you can sign up for the wonderful matching engine that Joseph Kim in the back has actually built for us to use. Anyway, we look forward to having you at the events. We also have a patent event on the 19th, and we'll have a number of events next year, including a Bitcoin and Dream It, Code It, Win It. Look forward to seeing you at our future events. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I was going to begin with thanks as well, but there's been way too much gratitude in too short of a time. So what I'm going to do is thank you all for attending, and thank you in advance for your attention, but I do want to thank the panelists now, because there's absolutely no guarantee that they'll be thanking me at the end of this. The topic of Uber-ization was partly done as a lure, as a shiny object to get people in the room, but it also represents, as Bruce was saying, a fundamentally important business model realization. And we want to go into some of the fundamentals of the larger issue of the business model that it represents. And I just want to say that it's important. One of my goals for this is that you come away with a very clear understanding of the specific goals and aspirations of the entrepreneurs and companies represented on the stage. But in aggregate, I want everybody in this room to come away with a sense of what this category, what this industry, what this movement is about. And so we're going to begin with some very quick questions, and then about half an hour to 40 minutes in, we're going to go to you. And we're going to take questions and comments, and it'll be my role to facilitate and moderate this. But before I go to the questions, I want to root this in what I think are important fundamentals. In 2012, a guy by the name of Alvin Roth, who was then a Harvard professor, nobody's perfect, he's now at Stanford, again, nobody's perfect, won the Nobel Prize for the remarkable work he did in market design. If any of you know people who are doctors and went through residencies in the residency matching domain, or anybody who's ever donated or needed a kidney, this is the guy, Alvin Roth, who designed those matching markets. And so market design is absolutely key. How do you design efficient and effective markets? What does it mean to treat and design markets as a platform for matching and for innovation? And there were, by the way, Hal Varian, who some of you may know is the chief economist for Google, has paid a lot of attention to this area. This is a hot area, not just of economic theory and research, but for real-world implementation, as we'll see from the comments on the stage. But there are three qualities here that are key, and that I believe that each of these companies, all of these companies directly have to address these issues in market design. The first is you want to have a thick market. There needs to be a critical mass of buyers and sellers, of contributors and consumers. The second is you got to be able to handle the congestion that this thickness occurs, because it's not good enough if you have access to something, but it takes too long, or it costs too much, or there are latencies associated with this. And that's got to be key in the business model design. And the third, which is absolutely key, is that the market has to be safe. It has to make more sense to participate in the market than not participate in the market. And, with apologies to the high-frequency algorithmic traders in the audience, you don't want to do things that make it too easy to game the market to lead to perverse outcomes. And we're going to be talking about those issues as well. And the final point in this regard, before we go to the first question, is that when we talk about market design is a noun and a verb. It's dynamic. You're constantly iterating and redesigning based on how your sellers and how your buyers try to get the right kind of value that they want from participating in your market. And that's the challenge that every single one of our entrepreneurs and their teams face on stage. So we're going to go from the far right, my far right, your far left, no political inferences to be drawn from that, with Joseph. Quick questions. We're going to do a couple of rounds, and then we're going to facilitate a conversation. Maybe it turns into an argument, maybe not. Actually, it will turn into an argument. You have my guarantee on that. What's the most important thing you want this audience to understand about your company and what you're trying to do with it? Joseph.
Thank you, Michael. Keeping on the topic of Uber-ization, I think the one thing that I want to say about our company is our difference from that model, right? So the Uber model is to give the client a precise experience with a set of service providers, drivers in this case, right, with no ability for the service provider to shine or to express any element of creativity or talent on their part, right? So, I mean, in the driving business, that makes sense. You know, you just want to get from point A to point B. But what we're trying to do at PRIV is something a little bit different. We, you know, it's beauty, wellness, fitness. These are therapists. This is a very personal experience for many of the men and women that are clients. And we find our findings that the expectation is a little bit different. They are looking for an element of discovery where they could find a stylist, a hairstylist, a nail technician, a masseuse that they can repeat with. And most of our business is the discovery and repetition within the same service provider. And we allow that by featuring the service provider on the app.
So it's not just facilitating a transaction, you're trying to create a relationship.
Exactly, and the service provider, you know, has a portfolio up, a bio, a series of ratings, and that's the type of thing that you can review before you make your selection and when you can come back to. And then there's communication between them, and we're trying to facilitate that whole connection, you know, throughout the lifetime of the user. So
Excellent. Although, with all due respect, anybody who has driven in New York or Boston realizes that driving is a creative art as well. Allison.
So do we need to lean forward a little bit?
Yeah, maybe we can move the mics a little bit.
Move the mics a little bit? Okay, cool.
Audio, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So what I'd like for you to know about Axial is that we are the online capital market for private companies. And for those of you, it's a little easier to understand some of these consumer models. We're a B2B model around connecting companies between $5 and $100 million in revenue to the advisors and the capital providers that will either help them get additional investment or eventually sell their business.
So you want to disintermediate parasitical investment bankers.
We want to help investment bankers find the best possible, most relevant businesses for them to represent.
Very good.
And increase the close rates for both the bankers and the people that they represent.
So it's an efficiency play, not just a matching play.
So exactly to the point around differentiation, ours is a model, you know, as opposed to a part of the sharing economy that's around the on-demand economy, ours is much more around the access economy. This market is reforming itself online. As much as folks would like to say they have access to proprietary deals and they know every banker and they know every capital provider, that's just not how people are making decisions anymore. So we want to provide access and visibility visibility into this market as it reorganizes online.
David?
So Fivver is a world largest marketplace for digital services today. This means on the buyer side that if you are a small or medium business and you need to get a logo down or a voiceover or a translation or copywriting, you can go to Fivver and get it at an unbeatable value. If you are a seller, on the other hand, and if you have a digital talent, and if you have a computer and an internet connection, and if you want to make a secondary source of income, you go to Fivver, you become a seller in about 35 seconds. You can see your listing on the marketplace, and you are up for the races to become to earn income.
I have to ask the follow-up question. So low cost and the vendors. So on the supplier side, how excited are they at working for $5?
They don't
Now,
work.
and keep in mind that, you know, as you can tell from the accent French here, $5, 35 hours. What's the constraint here on?
Nice, touché. So they don't, you know, they don't work for $5 today. What's happening with Fivver as we started the company is all services start at $5. But when we started the company, the $5 was you remove the price out of the equation. So when you remove the price out of the equation at $5, what do the buyer wants to buy? They want to buy quality. And when you look at the makeup of our sellers, most of the sellers are coming from the United States. So they don't sell for $5. 80% of the transactions are much greater than $5. But we have shifted the conversation from a conversation of price to a conversation of quality. Check it out.
Excellent. Monk.
So what Handy does is we're a on-demand sort of home services platform. Some of you may have used it for cleaning, which is something we've started with, but expand into other services, home services. I think the number one thing to take away, which is maybe the most obvious point, is we really think deep and hard about the two different sides of our platform, and they are two distinct customers that we have, and most marketplaces have. They're the customers, and the value for them is really to make sure it's the easiest, most convenient way to get anything done around the house, and we're going to keep focusing on that. Lots of work left to do. And then on the supply side, which is almost more interesting, and I think that's where this market's evolved really, really fast, just labor in general, which is, earlier you had to choose between flexibility or certainty of income. You had to make that choice, right? If you go back 8 years ago, you either had to say, I work, only X to Y shift and I get paid X dollars an hour and it's guaranteed, but I have zero flexibility, or I run my own business, I'm a mom and pop shop, but then I can set my hours, but I have no certainty of income. And for the first time, I think with platforms like ours and obviously Uber, you can have both the flexibility that you wanted. You could say I only work in this area on this day, but as long as the platform is liquid, and that is key to some marketplaces such as ours, you get the certainty of income as well. So I think what's almost more magical, which you don't see as a customer, is what's going on sort of the supply or the labor side.
That's excellent, and I'm going to ask you a quick follow-up question, and then we'll go reverse on the major question. The quick follow-up question is, why do I want you and not Angie's List?
I think
free advertising here. Why do I want you and not Angie's List? Besides the fact that your advertisements don't suck.
Because I'm not on the ads.
Okay,
personally. But I think the biggest reason is honestly it's if you can get a transaction that is seamless end-to-end experience, which you can do in 60 seconds and someone is standing behind it, I think you start to trust the brand and it's just an easy experience. Whereas if I'm just an intermediary where I just show you a bunch of listings, but I'm pushing all the work onto you, like you go do the work itself, I think you're just adding less value.
Interesting. So they take the notion of a list more literally than Handy does. Yeah. That's your argument. Okay, so we'll use that as the gateway to the second question, reverse of the order here. We'll start with you, Amang. What is it that people typically just don't get that frustrates you or infuriates you about the business and the business model? What do people not get? Even the smart ones.
I think that's a good question. It's less of a like that angers me or frustrates me, and maybe it applies to, I think it probably applies to all businesses, which is, I think when you're working on a platform that has thousands of small individual transactions across like multiple cities and zip codes, and there are real individuals involved, so you're not just selling like an iPod that you produce millions of and you look at the defects on like 0.001 and that's a problem, is you don't extrapolate from anecdotal instances to sort of cast eye on the whole business model itself. And I think people have a tendency to do that, which is totally fair. I would do the same thing, and I do the same thing for other businesses. But that process sort of is a little, it's a learned experience, whereas I go and I read a tweet, and it says, my cleaner was late, this business model will never work because all the cleaners are late. And that's fair, and you need to take every feedback really importantly, but I think when you're in a marketplace that has millions at this point of transactions taking place, being able to lift up from and take the anecdotes really seriously, because you want to make sure every customer is important, every provider is important. But I think that piece where you're able to lift up and draw conclusions, not based on anecdotes.
Right. So it's the tension between anecdote versus data.
Yep.
In that regard.
I see, I'm French, so a few things piss me off. But there is, one is there is a $5, but we are.
So speaking English is upsetting you right now. Okay.
For example.
We should do this in Montreal. I apologize. Okay.
So if you think the $5, but we are off that conversation, yes, so that's good. Yes. That's awesome. The second thing is, I think we are, and we touch on that subject for a little bit, which is it's about seller earnings. Look, revenue for our company, it's about seller earnings, is what our sellers are making. So
you should explain, you're taking some percentage off of this.
We are taking a percentage of the earnings of the seller, which is 20%. It's a flat, simple flat rate. But the important message is, yes, buyer experience, simplicity of the transaction, largest catalog of services in the world. You have all of those must-haves that e-commerce for us has developed 20 years ago. But on the other side, where we are really paying a lot of attention is we need to be material to our sellers. We need to change their life, and we need to impact their life. And that aspirational goal is really something that is driven all of the decisions that we're doing on the marketplace, algorithm development, how to accelerate their ability to make more money, how do you balance the marketplace between younger seller and older seller. All of these are very important vectors that we're thinking about every day, and that making the life of, having come from e-commerce before, it's e-commerce square, because all of your problems are multiplied by 2, or all of your challenge and opportunities are multiplied by 2. So that's, I think, seller earnings versus revenue, and thinking that we're thinking about that every day. I think it's something that.
Excellent. Alison?
So I have two things that I think are really frustrating. The first is from the model perspective. So exactly to the point of it's ×2, we have a multi-sided network. So we're trying to connect a CEO to their banker or advisor, and then to their investor or buyer. So that's ×3, and then however big we can make this market, it will be times that. And the piece of that that's the hardest is just balancing the technology with the people investment that you have to make to get it right. So it's sort of, maybe you find someone and they.
What does a better job, the people or the technology in your business?
The people, always. But that's what it should be, right? Because the people come first, and then you automate what they've learned through their process. So the people start, they go and they figure out, okay, well, Bob said he wanted this.
You really get, you're going to look me in the eye saying that you're building this kind of a market, and you get a better marginal return on dollar invested in people than in your algorithms and in your network?
I think in the long term, we absolutely will get more value from the algorithm, but you can't build the algorithm until you know how people actually represent themselves and connect using the network. So, everything that the algorithm is now doing. So for example, for us, if you're presenting a company on Axial and you're a manufacturing company, that's one level, but actually you're a fabricator of steel components for air conditioning units. And our taxonomy is only as flexible as we can get down to that level of granularity, but we didn't know which type of taxonomy. There are multiple types of taxonomy that you can use. So it's that level of stuff that you only get through the people having those conversations, and then you can automate it and kind of learn through those pieces of it. And I think the second thing is that in these types of a network, again, to the point about your members or the people that you're serving representing themselves and the conversation and the standardization of their communication, that they need to actively manage their presence, and they need to basically become digital marketers within whatever environment you're creating. And when people don't actively manage, and then they blame the network, again, oh, you didn't have a great experience. Well, you might have if you were clearer on what you were looking for, et cetera. So we spend a lot of time and energy trying to help people use the network in an efficient way.
So really, the issue of digital presence and how the representation of self is absolutely key to market efficiency and market effectiveness on both sides.
It's not gaming the system, it's working the system. You know, how do you be found in the right place by the right person, and then how do you present yourself to get that conversation going?
Joseph, do you echo this, or do you have different frustrations?
Now, I mean, how much time do I have to answer this question? So I think what really gets me is that what really frustrates me is what people don't get is the complexity of this type of transaction, right? So, I mean, from the technological point of selection
Is it complex, or did you just do a bad job of designing it?
I mean, I'm not even talking about the app design now, right? I'm talking about the app in general, the selection and response, then to appointment negotiation, which a little bit still happens, even though because, professional might want to change the time a little bit, to the logistics of getting there, to the logistics of setting up and presenting oneself, in a consistent manner, and then finally the doing of the service. I mean, from that whole, that whole gamut of things, so much can go wrong, and so much does go wrong. So,
what have you learned? You were an entrepreneur in a previous life. What's the real complexity? Is it the rubber meets the road thing, or is it that you pick the wrong thing to design around?
What I think it is that, at the end of the day, we're still dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people...
So your business would be great if it weren't for the people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great if it weren't for people. If it weren't for managing expectations. No, I'm kidding. But, no, I mean, it's the control of the whole process that I just met.
Is it control or influence? Are you
that's when you're building a marketplace, that's the question, right? How much do you give up? Do you give up control, or do you give up scalability, right? So
what do you give up?
So that's the balance. I mean, that's the balancing.
What do you give up? Tell us. What are you giving up? What's the tough debate right now about what you have to give up at PRIV?
So we have to find a way, and we do every day, to come up with scalable quality control measures, right? And we've come up with pretty innovative ones, I think, so that we could allow the service provider their own abilities to build their business.
Tell us one. Tell us one. Give us an example.
Okay, so we built this online training tool, for example, and onboarding tool, right? So it's a complicated process. It gives enough, impetus. It gives enough inhibition for any Joe Schmo to come on and be a makeup
Don't call
artist.
your customers Joe Schmo.
No, I'm talking about the provider side.
But secondly, I want to drill down on this. It's an onboarding thing. I would have guessed that's the kind of thing you do in a startup, because you have to onboard the vendors. Mm-hmm. Is this something you designed in, or you discovered because it became a real friction point? By the way, anybody who's ever taken a lift, no pun intended, with an Uber driver who's just on their first week on the job, it's clear they have onboarding issues as they scale. So I want to get a sense of how you deal with that.
Discovered because we were originally doing it very manually, right? Every professional was coming in, interviewing, technical interviews, background checks, and then we just basically took that whole process and automated it. So it doubled and tripled and quadrupled in the first months.
Fantastic.
The amount of people that we can get on, and kept the quality the way that we like it. So.
What about the rest of you? Do you have similar issues or stories? You look like you have something to say on this, David.
Okay.
And Allison, feel free to disagree with him the moment he's done.
I feel a fight coming, I know.
Fivver was built on removing all of the friction at the sign-up process. For a buyer, it's very easy to buy. You buy a book on Amazon, and for a seller, it's very easy to list a service. This created a situation where millions of buyers, hundreds of thousands of sellers we have. The velocity of new sellers is very, very high, and the onboarding is also a key element for Fivver. The way we are doing it is that we created some level system on the platform.
I have to interrupt and ask both of you, and someone else can kick in. Do you have a kill this person or kill this vendor point in onboarding, where they've behaved or make a choice where it says, you know what, I don't want them on our network? Are you using onboarding not just as a way to get people up to speed, but as a qualification mechanism to prevent scalable quality control issues down the road?
Yes, exactly. I mean, oh, it's for him? Oh, sorry.
Please, no.
Oh,
Speak
so
up.
exactly. That is how we built it. I mean, that is the purpose of it. Exactly. Right on. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree. We definitely do. I mean, the onboarding is if you go through handy.com/apply, if you say you're a cleaner, it's a objective exam-based.
Right. So we're not really onboarding, it's a qualification mechanism. So it's like one of these things where we're doing assessment, but it's not really assessment, it's do we hire you?
Correct. I mean, and then there is an onboarding component, which is
How many fail?
we've had over 500,000 people apply, 60, 70, 80% fail.
Fail?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, the vast majority. Everyone thinks they're a cleaner or a handyman, but you're not really a cleaner.
We see similar numbers like that too.
Your numbers are similar?
Yeah. People that don't.
So I just want to say something. People talk about, I just forgive my editorializing here, but you read in every single mainstream and elite business publication, oh, the gig economy, what these people are saying is literally over half of the people who apply to perform in the gig economy don't even qualify for the gig economy. I assume you're running FICOs and D&Bs on your Axial folks there.
Yeah. No, actually, we wait until we see what they produce and the kind of deals that they, it's a little bit different from our market because we really want people to be posting deals on the network, and a lot of people haven't done it before. So we have to take responsibility to train them to be able to present a deal onto the network in one time, as opposed to folks who have more objective qualifications. We don't suggest that we certify them, and you also do your own due diligence because the process is much longer.
You took the words right out of my mouth. So the issue that you're going to have, and PRIV is going to have, because with certification, you don't want to run into problems with the SEC, God forbid, but at a certain point, people are going to have an expectation that there'll be, if not formal certification, that you vouch for the deals. How do you do that? What are you doing that gives credibility in that regard?
Well, at the basic level, we put standards on the way you present your deal, so that we can tell you, for example, if you're presenting current financials or financials for a business that are below a certain threshold, we'll tell you this deal is not going to get any interest because it's just either the numbers are not correct, which we can ask you,
Oh my God, you're doing auditing and assurance now as well?
No, exactly. We ask them, these need to be verified. Have they been audited? We take their word for it. If we find out that they are
Excuse me,
not.
say that one more time. You take their word for it?
When they have an experience with a buyer where they have not given proper financials, then they are no longer present on Axial. But
So what's the hit rate in that regard?
I would have to check on that. I don't know.
Okay. Is
Because a lot of people
is it comparable to the numbers we're hearing about over half, or do you have a higher quality?
No, we have a higher quality. We don't have a market penetration, and it's not. These are people who obviously have markets for their deals already. This is just supplementing their deals, as opposed to somebody who's looking for a second income or something that's a little more close to their family situation. I mean, I think these guys, you can find a buyer for almost any business in the U.S., and these guys are just adding 20 to 30% more interested parties on top of it. So it's not a required service.
Are they
for them.
more or less sleazy than a commercial real estate person?
Either and both.
Wow.
I mean, people will misrepresent, and we have to get them off as soon as we possibly can. Using all caps in a title is usually a good way to suggest that exclamation points, best opportunity in the world. There are some key indicators that you can.
So you're in one of those markets where superlatives are a bad thing.
Just don't do it. Even if you're going to be trying to put something on that's not totally audited and verified, like if you use the caps, we're getting rid of it. So.
David, you're looking contemplative here.
Yeah, I mean, for Fivver, it's very different. We are trying. Everyone can become a seller. Your ability to become a seller is 100%. and we're trying to bring you as quickly as possible a first sale. And it's digital services. There is much less risk involved. In that process, the risk is you have a bad quality on the delivery you get. You get a bad logo, or you get a bad product at the end, and you are not happy with it. So understanding the criteria of quality in the experience or in the delivery is really what we look for.
But you see, now I'm feeling a bit of bait and switch. I don't know how to say bait and switch in French. I know it would sound better. Because here we are, we're coming in on the low side, but you've changed, you said one of the most important things you've done is you've changed the debate from price to quality. But the higher price I pay in expectation of getting good quality, the more harm I face if that quality isn't delivered. I can afford to lose $5. I can afford to lose $25. But when I get to the 100, when I'm paying hundreds and I'm counting on a level of quality, I need you to vouch.
Sure. But on the platform, you will have identity, ratings that allows you to make that decision, levels. We have, you will find sellers with tens of thousands of ratings or reviews. You can see what they have delivered in the past. You can start to buy something for $25, and if you like what he does, you can spend $100, and if you like what he does, you can spend $1,000.
So your argument is you have created an infrastructure and a mechanism where a smart buyer can manage the risk themselves based on the information they've provided. So what kind of, forgive me for it, but there have been fake reviews put up. How do you deal with those sorts of things? How do you deal with people who do, in fact, not in theory, in fact, game the system to exploit the very mechanisms you're trying to do to assure quality?
On Fivver, it's simple. We do not allow anyone that didn't make a purchase to make a review.
Verified so you go straight on the verified purchase.
If you want to make a review, you need to buy something. And if you don't buy something, you cannot make a review.
And how effective are your auditing and assurance mechanisms in that regard?
What auditing and insurance mechanism?
That people aren't gaming the system and claiming that something has taken place. I guess what I'm looking at is...
There is no way in the product today for you to post a review if you didn't make a purchase. Now, the question is, can you game the system and ask your buddy to go buy from you and to post a review? Maybe. Is that complicated? Rather complicated for that to happen, rather than posting on other website a review without making a purchase. So we are trying to really build a product that stays very simple, and try to be strict in the outcome of the features that we are developing.
Okay, Umang and Peter, Joseph, how are reviews? How do you do the reviews and create that kind of leverage your users and your customers to provide assurance and risk reduction?
So reviews are really, and for us it's numerical. It goes back to the data are really, really important for us. So if any of you booked, you'd see after every single job you do, the customer gets asked for a rating, on a 1 to 5 scale, based on you essentially almost have to rate, like 70% of the jobs are rated. We're gonna at some point, Uber obviously makes it 100%. You have to, or the next time you open the app, it won't even let you go further. And the reason they do that, and the reason we do it as well, is two things. One, if you submit a low rating, we'll make sure you don't get the same person. You don't want to keep angering or disappointing the customer. But B, it keeps the marketplace clean, right? Every professional on the platform has an aggregate rating. There are all kinds of, automated. They see how rates are trending. If rates are trending down, it triggers communication. If they go beyond a certain level, you can get suspended off the platform.
Are you constantly refining these things, or you pretty much know what you're doing right now?
No, we're constantly. I mean, one of the things that I should have mentioned, probably what frustrates me the most related to that, is we have 50 engineers right now working on the product. They're all based in New York City, and everyone's like, wait, you're a cleaning company and you have 50 engineers? Like, what work do these people do?
These people are snobs. They're snobs. But what are they doing?
They're doing it. It's a pretty complicated matching people, supply and demand. Like, is a pretty complicated process, and it starts off simple when you're doing 10 jobs, and when you're doing like 10,000 a day, it gets even more complicated. And so a lot of that work is matching supply and demand, thinking about like ratings and quality, and how to, like, if someone wants a particular person, how does that person likely to take the job?
Do you end up coming up with multiple fields? Not just doubling down on existing metrics, but trying to expand the bandwidth of the metrics. Like some people are very concerned about punctuality. Other people are very concerned about tidiness. Other people are concerned about, quote unquote, craft or workmanship, or that the people were polite, good manners.
Right.
Do you find yourself consolidating or expanding the way you offer your people ways to judge what kind of handy to match?
So for the customer, we try and keep it relatively simple, which is you give a numeric rating. If the rating is low, it starts to drill down on why it's low so that we have some aggregate data to be able to work and provide feedback to the professional. But internally, we are running the business at this point, I would say, with thousands of metrics that we're looking at every single week. Thousands.
How many did you have last year?
Very few. We started with call it 5, moved to 100, and at this point, there's a good 40-page deck that every Tuesday at the senior team.
Oh my God! So what are you going to have next year? Hundreds of thousands?
I think may have, but we'd probably need to go back the other way and ball it back up to what are the 5 things you care about on a weekly basis. I think it's just a evolution where suddenly at this point we're looking at a ton of things because everything feels important. But at some point, as the team starts to grow, and we're a couple of hundred people at the company now. When you get to 1,000 people or so, I think you'll need to lift up and.
Are you running into the same issue, Joseph, or because of the nature of the focus? I can imagine circumstances where some I have to be careful of my gender inappropriateness here, but somebody wants, I almost said blowjob, but I mean a blowout. Somebody wants a blowout, and the reality is they don't want somebody talking to them. They just, if they can get a terrific blowout, but if the person is too chatty, they don't want to deal with. Is that the kind of issue that you're dealing with?
Yeah, that is definitely one of the issues that we deal with that comes up. So our rating system.
Have you literally said to somebody,
Yeah.
you would be way more profitable if you would just shut up?
We have said it multiple times to many people. Like from complaints from clients that, you'll see them in their so.
Chris will say that later on, but
So
go
our
ahead.
rating
Yes.
system from the beginning was pretty involved. We allowed the client to rate on punctuality, cleanliness, and professionalism, and leave a comment, and they almost always do. And if somebody is great but chatty, you'll see that almost every time. So we often do, service provider reviews. We ask them to come in and we give them some advice as to how to manage their business better. But going back to the point that David started with and then Umang was going with was that, in our process specifically, we talked about that quality control onboarding, but yeah, eventually we're pushing for the community to keep the quality control going, right? So that's the ultimate goal.
Your
right?
measure of effectiveness, and I want a quick show of hands, your measure of effectiveness is not how good of a job you do in managing and coming up with metrics, but how good of a job you do in getting your customer/community to become self-regulating on your behalf.
Yeah, you can say that. I mean, it's like a handoff, right? So we do as much as we can.
Does your business model fail if they don't step up?
If the provider doesn't step up.
Yes. If your community turns out to be loosey-goosey, I know for
I don't think
Allison.
so. I mean, I think that's the whole purpose of the rating system. I mean, to glean out.
So your future is contingent upon the quality of your rating system.
Yeah.
That true for everyone here?
I would say it's a big part.
I mean, uplifting our community all the time and finding good, the right ways to do it so the community can self-regulate is, ultra important.
I think there's a little more than that for us, and I don't know if there's a similar comp, which is one of the reasons customers are happy is if they search tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. on the Lower East Side, I want a 3-hour cleaning, and we can't deliver on that. That's the market's problem. That's
the
our
congestion
fault.
issue.
Correct.
That's your fault.
And so we need to. It's the equivalent if you open the app outside after this and you try and get an Uber and it says 11 minutes. I'm not going to wait for it, right? I'm going to be like, that was a terrible experience. I needed to say 2 minutes.
11 minutes? Good Lord.
on demand. I need it to be 2 or 3 minutes, or I'm going to get impatient and stick my hand out and get into a cab, and that's it. They've lost my business, and I'm still not happy. So
We need to play poker at some point. Sorry, okay.
so I think that's the marketplace's problem, right? So you can't just put it on the community saying, figure this out. Like, we need to be able to, and in cities like New York now, if you try searching on Handy, 94% of the time, any date-time combination you search for, we will accept the booking within 30 seconds and deliver on it.
What's your bottom line success rate? 90%? What are you running capacity on?
So across the board, it's about 85%, but as a city scales, it starts to get better and better, and so that's why scale is really important for us, because there's
thick
just
mar- the thick
critical
market,
mass in an area.
So you're contingent upon a thick market.
Right.
Kind of things. Very good. So the last question I want to do a quick, before we turn it over to the audience here, is this one. And you've set this up beautifully for me. I'd like you to spend a couple of moments describing your best customers, and you're all two-sided markets, so both your providers and your customers are customers, your best customers, but I also want you to describe your typical customers. So I'm interested in the tail, and I'm interested in the median. What does the tail have in common? What does the median, and what's the big difference between them?
So our best customers are becoming digital marketers of themselves and their businesses. They know,
Which is the exact point you made about the importance of presence.
right, they understand how to use the platform. They are assertive in the way that they go after deals. And we're both a market and a network. So, some folks, there's a market network term that works for businesses like ours, and they both know how to be in the line of deal flow, and then they also know how to build relationships out of that, and they use those things together. Our average customers are folks who are used to having a glut of supply in the market for what they're looking for, and the market is changing around them, and I think that they would rather be on the golf course and doing the same offline strategies that they've been doing before, and they're skeptical that they need to come with us as the market moves, and so
They view you as a necessary evil, accent on necessary.
exactly. And so we would love for them to be active and engaged and positive members. And we're getting there, but I think naturally they would like to be doing things the way that's been working for their business for the last 25 years. This has been an existing market, since private equity started investing in businesses.
So marketing's job is to move the median one standard deviation over.
We want them to feel comfortable, we want them to feel confident, and we want them to be actively managing their presence on the network, and it benefits everyone if they do.
Mang?
Our best customer is someone who really values their house being in good shape and is willing to spend. So someone who gets their house cleaned every single week.
Anal retentives.
Yeah, gets the house cleaned every single week, has a need for all kinds of handyman electrical services, but they're constantly tinkering in their house, and there's a subtle distinction, and doesn't contact us too often. So they understand technology, they understand, they just instinctively get. So people use
It's not good enough that they're anal retentive, they can be
we'll take it.
self-sufficiently anal retentive.
We'll take it, but if you're saying best customer, it's someone who just gets it and can keep going with the flow.
What about on the other side of the network?
Yeah.
They're your customers too.
They are, and it's tricky because I don't think our best, the traditional answer would be our best supply is someone who does a lot of jobs on the platform, is always available, but I think we're learning, we need to adapt because the average person on Handy is doing about 15 hours a week, not 40 hours a week, but 15. And so...
Hold on a second. How many of them want to do 20 or 30 hours a week? Is it 15 by choice or 15 as a function of what's available?
It's largely by choice because we look at a city like New York where we're pretty condensed and pretty dense, and you could get more jobs. You go to Tampa, obviously that maybe we're not big enough, et cetera, but in New York we really are. And it's because they have got some dependency. They've either taken care of children or parents, or they've got something else, or they're in school. And so our best customer there is probably just someone who consistently dips in, does 4 or 5 jobs a week, and maintains a good quality
So why don't you
score.
cut a deal with care.com and take care of their kids so they can do more work for you?
That would open up our supply base.
Are you going to do that?
No, we just want to fit, at least for now, we just want to fit into their lifestyle. At some point, if we run out of supply, if you will, maybe, but that's not a top priority.
Okay. David?
best buyer would be someone who use Fivver to do everything they need to do digitally. So when they have something to do, they think Fivver, and they go to us first before trying to find an offline solution or.
So no staples, no digital. You are the agency. You are the default choice for anything having to do with digital
creative
design.
and professional services.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So it will be frequency, driving frequency with a platform. A good buyer, a typical buyer, will use us for let's say one category. Let's get my logo down on Fivver, but don't think about Fivver for the next task they have to do.
So why don't you do conjoint marketing so that if somebody who uses you for one kind of design, you make an offer or a promotion to go more horizontal with your services?
For example, yeah. For example.
Are you doing that?
Yeah.
Well, tell us what you're doing.
No, but this becomes, understanding, the way we are approaching that is understanding cluster of services to be able to...
Do you have good enough data to be able to do predictive analytics for service clustering?
When you have millions of active customers, yes, you have enough.
Do you have millions of active customers?
Yes.
Are you doing it?
Yes.
What portion of your business is a function of your improved investment in predictive analytics?
Not enough.
Is not enough less than 5%?
No. It's more than that. Most of the recommendation you will see, for example, on Fivver, if you are a buyer, if you browse through Fivver, most of your experience is going to be driven by a lot of recommendations. Those recommendations are proven to have a conversion rate which is much higher than the non-recommended services.
Joseph, I see similar issues that you have with David. Is it your...
You have issues with me? Or?
I have a lot of issues with you. I don't like the French. No, I'm kidding. So, which question do you want me to answer?
The question on best and average, because
Oh, okay.
I see the same issue though with clustering of somebody is using you for, got it right, blowouts, but manicures, other a more horizontal array of services.
Sure.
You have that's what you advertise and promote. So
That's right. So the best customer has basically made PRIV has made their beauty and wellness regime a big part with PRIV, right? So they're getting their hair done, they're getting their nails done, they're working out with us.
So it's not just wallet share, it's time share, pun intended.
Yeah, so they're making PRIV really a significant part of their week, right? That's on the client side. The typical customer.
Definition of a significant part of the week is give me hours.
I'd give you transactions, 4 to 5 transactions a week.
Very good. And what portion of your customer base is 4 to 5 transactions a week?
It's a smaller portion. I mean, it's about 5 or 6%. I mean, it's
and
not
your goal is to get it up to 10% by when?
Our goal is to get it up to 10% by as soon as possible. Next week, right now.
And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Entrepreneur.
And the typical customer is on because they wanted to try to get their nails done at home, and that's the service that they're now true to, and they're using a couple of times a month. Right. So, and on the service provider side, though, and I think I mentioned it in a couple of times with some different questions, there's really 4 major qualifications that a provider needs to do if they want to get their act together, if they want to be good on the platform, and that's punctuality, service quality, presentation, and then also just the initial responsiveness and engagement on the app itself, right? So the best provider is the provider that's figured that out and is working it from all those angles. Usually when they first get on the app, they're very good at maybe getting there on time, but there's still every piece of this puzzle that they want to get to. So our best providers are the ones who show up on time, who do a good service, who answer on time, and that's a big one too, answering on time. I think that's a big problem with a lot of different
Portion of them
services.
use Uber or Lyft to get on time.
Well, in LA, everybody drives, so they all have cars. Parking is a problem. We sometimes have to supplement with Uber rides. We use that all the time. And Via, which is the cheapest of them all.
Very good. So we have networks of platforms.
Who's getting out?